everybody. Welcome to Spiral Process Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Dmitry Wolfovich. Today we have a special guest, Rachel Jordana. Um, she's going to talk about dance, meditation, psychological processes. Um, hey, Rachel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Do you want to maybe start with just a little bit about yourself? I know you've had some interesting projects as of late, or you've created some new things. Maybe you want to kind of go over what you've been up to first, just to kind of introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Dr. Rachel Jordana Horodezky. I go by a few different names. Rachel Jordana is usually the name I use when I'm teaching dance, and Dr. Rachel Horodezky is often the name that I use as a psychologist.
Mm.
And I actually initially started that as a way to separate the two because I was feeling almost embarrassed to teach dance and also to be a therapist. And I was having a hard time being in both roles, and so I separated them. But recently I decided that that is just not going to fly, and I've decided to go fully by Dr. Rachel Jordana Horodezky in all reins and to really, really own and incorporate how much I believe that dance is an important part of therapy for anyone who's interested in it.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot already.
I'm a psychologist and I have a private practice in Santa Cruz along with some interns at my clinic called the Center for Embodiment Medicine. And I have
That,
two.
that's new, right?
That's new. Yeah, I just started that. So for a decade, I've been dreaming of this mind, body, spirit clinic. An opportunity for not only there to be therapy, but community and also movement and spiritual practice. And it's just starting. It's in its infancy now. So I started it last year.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And maybe you could tell us the other projects you do, open floor. Is that what you do? Or by rhythms?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a five rhythms teacher, which is a dance that was developed by Gabrielle Roth at Esalen. And I also, so that is a style of dance that I teach, and I teach workshops in it along with weekend morning dances. And then I'm also a DJ. So I DJ at different ecstatic dances and collectives. One of them is a bit more of a dance practice. Another one is a little bit more of a dance party, but both of them are opportunities for pretty deep spiritual practice if you choose.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. And I'm wondering what's been, is there something that's been kind of jazzing you up or you feel kind of excited about within these realms of like psychology and dance, or is there something that that's been getting you excited or some kind of.
Yeah, well, I think this has been getting me excited for a long time, but I've just kind of continually going into more and more detail about it. But one of the things that I absolutely love, especially when clients or patients actually come to my dance workshops, is how much psychological work can get done in 2 hours of dance. There's something that happens sometimes if you bring in an intention of moving beyond words and breaking out of some, whatever they are, habitual developmental patterns. And then in our brain, we actually create, sometimes there's an aha, sometimes there's a resolution, and sometimes there's a new pathway that moves towards freedom. And it's just been so exciting for me to hear people, to hear people talk for a couple years and for us to have some beautiful movement in the talking,
Hmm.
in a talking medium, and then for them to go to one dance workshop, and then all of a sudden it almost all culminates and can come together, and it rearranges in a new way, and then it brings our talk therapy in a really new direction, and it's very exciting for me.
Hmm. Yeah. It makes me remember when I in the days where I used to go to the Five Rhythms classes with Claire Alexander. I remember there were moments where I would be dancing something and then like some kind of theme, and then um it was like some kind of like bad, like I was feeling like bad or like a bad guy or a bad boy or something. And I found that there was, I don't know, maybe it was some sense of permission or something that I would just go with it. Like I would dance that sentiment out or something. So like I remember I was dancing this badness or something, and how good it felt to just follow through with that feeling. Um, and I think to what you're saying for me, that's the benefit I found with dance, like always as used therapeutically, is that um, I think when you're talking about yourself, it's harder to follow some of these threads because you're kind of constrained by these connotations that like, oh, you have to conduct yourself in a certain way, or there's a certain formality with sitting with two people sitting together and talking. And um, so you're kind of limited to express yourself in a way or how to follow a feeling through to its completion, you know? And so I think that dance almost like for me, it was provided a place where I can like move things that were maybe like taboo or something, or maybe paradoxically not acceptable or something like that.
Well, I love what you're bringing up, which is that we actually can get limited by social convention. That when we're talking to each other, there's some notion that we're supposed to friend or act a certain way, or there's shame or what you think of me. There are all of these filters. But when we end up in the dance spaces and there's full permission to just move in any which way and to basically remove any notions of what we think are normal or acceptable. Of course, there is consent and there's some agreements on the dance floor, but for the most part, we can move in creative, unique ways that you normally wouldn't do in public. And nobody understands what you're thinking, right? So you can be moving and processing and looking strange and doing something way beyond social convention and have a breakthrough that you might not have when you've got the filter of trying to communicate with another person or talk.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that's like the main problem I find with regular therapy is that there's this sort of connotation or like people connotate um through like the conceptual realm like of like whatever they know their problem to be um uh of what I think my problem is only that is also just another connotation, right? It's like, oh, I have a problem with anxiety or something. And even that is like, oh, that's what I call it. It's not like what it is. And you know, so I think the movement actually brings you closer to what your actual experience is than what you call it.
Absolutely. So I also am an ecotherapist and I take people out into nature. And one of the ideas is that we go into pre-verbal states and communicate from the moments before we had language. I don't know if you know that this quote, it's Saint Exupéry, it's the Petit Prince, but his language is the source of all misunderstanding.
Can you say it slowly so that maybe somebody might know it?
Language, language is the source of most misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is what we say was, or there's another quote, between what we say and what we mean, most of love is lost. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
Cabral. So there are all of these ways that we can communicate on a deeper pre-verbal level if we just turn off our minds. And therapy is so fabulous. Obviously, we're both therapists and we do love to talk and to be seen and reflected, and there is a lot of value in that.
Mm-hmm.
There's also something called mentalizing that people do, which is a very strong defense mechanism, which is that
Right.
rather than feel your feelings, we're going to think about them and then try and think our way out of a problem instead of feeling our way into the problem. And we can use mentalizing actually as a way to avoid feeling.
Right.
And it's a very easy trap to get into. And you just can't do that when there are no words.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. It makes me think of I know this is not for everybody as far as gurus or teachers, but Osho, he would say in one of his books he was writing about that when you have the experience of love, you don't think of love. And when you think of love, you don't have the experience of love. Or when there's the thought of joy, there is no joy. And when there is the joy, there is no thought of joy. So it's like oil and water. You have either the thought or the experience. Um, did I go out there for a moment? I don't
You
know.
did, but I heard you. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
That's right.
so like
Feet in it. Yeah.
the concept is a like a not a facsimile, but a replacement or like a substitute. It's a substitute for the experience, so like you're not dealing with the real direct experience. You're just dealing with some kind of reiteration or some kind of like substitute for some experience. It's like a post on Facebook or something, in a way, the mental stuff.
Right. Well, maybe it can be one step removed, and maybe our goal is to get to the heart and the body of the matter. And sometimes through reflection, validation, and deep listening, you can get to the heart of the matter. And sometimes you need a little nudge into a different level of consciousness and another state of consciousness. And dance is one way to get into an alternate state so that you can really feel and experience instead of naming and observing what you're feeling and experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you ever do like one-on-one dance therapy stuff, or is it mostly in groups that you work?
I have done one-on-one. I'm not a trained dance movement therapist. That is a different
Right.
form of therapy, and I can't even speak to it because I don't really know what it is. But I have certainly worked with very small groups and with individuals. It's very live, it's very live. And I don't yeah, I wouldn't say it's my specialty. I would say it's more of an experiment, but it's really fun to do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, sometimes there will be moments, so not in clinical treatment, so not if I'm with someone who's agreed to do talk therapy with me and I'm on an insurance panel, maybe we'll definitely do somatic practices, where do you feel that? Or if you moved your arm, what would it look like? But we're not going to get up and do a full-fledged dance party.
Dance, right. Yeah, 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 yeah.
But I just personally am still at a place where I am licensed by the Board of Psychology. That is not my psychological training. That being said, at dance workshops, there are deep, deep therapeutic elements. And then sometimes people who are not my clients will come to me and just want to do some coaching work or something like that. Um, and we can do interesting things with movement there, like I'm actually thinking specifically, I won't name the person, but there was a while I had a women's movement class going with a group of women. I think there was 8 of us who were leading the class, and we'd gather every Thursday morning to dance with like 20 women. And on Fridays we had labs. And I remember one of the teachers was having some issues around money and being charged their worth, right? And they just started in a circle and they were talking about how they feel about money. And then each of us kind of slowly took on like a physical position. Like when I remember going up to her and being like, I am $100 bill, push back on me. Push back on me. Now tell me whether you want this or if you don't want this. We started really embodying and acting out and doing psychodrama with a lot of what was going on in that person's internal mind. And I remember it being so exhilarating and so groundbreaking for her.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like there's so many different parallels between like Gestalt and like um psychodrama and like dance movement therapy and like they all kind of like have such a similar, like I mean it's like a different branch altogether, of course, but I really appreciate that too. I actually did some training in dance movement therapy, but I never completed it. I studied with Bonnie Bernstein, and I did like 4 50-hour classes with her. I think I was supposed to do 2 more, and then I was supposed to start the internship where you have to like get hours or something. You have to like get hours for the license. So I was into it for a while, but it is for me, I find that it is a lot similar to like what you're saying. This kind of like experiential process with the thematic element of whatever they're like, okay, the money, you're pushing money away, and then you're using somebody else or some prop as a movement piece to like bring that to life. And I find that to be very powerful. Um, regardless. And because I think that people need to come into the experience more to really figure out what they need to do instead of just sitting there thinking about, you know, why they can't accept money into their life, for instance, or something.
Well, and it's so live and creative. And when you're in the moment, when you're riffing or when I'm riffing with someone, when we're literally creating art and therapy at the same time, we're creating some kind of psychodrama where we're externalizing the issue and giving them an opportunity to speak and act or growl or move with whatever that issue is and see it in a new way. And then we also create the opportunity sometimes to create corrective emotional experiences, right? So in that instance, I don't remember what happened, but it's totally possible that say we were all acting like $100 bills and there was five of us. She might have like gathered us all around and given us a hug in the end to make peace with the $500 she's not accepting, or uh, it just the creativity creates a catalyst for change and new pathways.
I really like what you're saying. I've recently was reading this Gestalt book about like that you're creating art. It's like there's this whole perspective in Gestalt that like the therapist shouldn't be a passive reflector. That the therapist aliveness co-creates this sort of like magical art experience. And and it's like kind of paradox. I mean, it's paradoxical or counterintuitive because we in psychology we have a lot of this stuff about like countertransference. So it's like this whole idea. I mean, sure you know, but but just like I don't know if you viewers, whoever's listening, like this idea that like you um can like project your own stuff, unprocessed stuff onto the client, or make assumptions or biases about the client, or be like frustrated with them or something. And so like and traditionally in psychology, we're taught to like, oh, you should mind your countertransference and be aware that don't put your stuff onto their client. And then I think there's room to be aware of that, but I think there's a kind of counter point that the Gestalt people say is that like, well, if you um if you water yourself so much and you're not really like alive in the room and you're not like attending to whatever is arising in you as a therapist, then like you're not really like honing yourself as an instrument, so you're not really like having a lively interaction, and you're not like having reactions that they're there then they have to contend with, or like if you feel disgusted all of a sudden, then maybe you should say it because like I was one of my interns was just saying that their client was talking about something that was that was a little bit TMI or a little bit edgy, like some sexual stuff. And she was saying, oh, I feel like I was feeling a little disgusted, but I didn't I was trying to keep it in because I wanted to have this allowing, and I didn't want to shut my client down. And one of the things that I was coaching her on was that like you don't have to shut somebody down to also include your own aliveness. It's like so that you can still share, okay, well, I feel a little bit of disgust. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't talk about you. That doesn't mean that I don't want you to stop anything. But now I'm noticing that, and now you can respond to it. And maybe can be a kind of a co-created interaction of that I'm going to be a real person, that I'm not going to be this like blank slate thing. And
Right.
I think that's what makes it into art, because you have like two like human beings together.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I was taught actually you always analyze your countertransference, never to repress it, always to acknowledge it and then use it. Maybe not always to speak it depending on what's going on, but
Right.
sometimes to say, well, I'm feeling this little bit, but I'm surprised that I'm feeling this because usually that's not how I think I would respond to this. So I'm just curious about that. A, how does that make you feel that I tell you I'm feeling a little bit of this? And B, do you have a part of you that's feeling that? Am I picking up on something for you? Or did you feel like that when someone else told you this story one time? Or, usually to bring the countertransference, I like to bring the countertransference into the room and then ask them what they make of it and how it lands for them.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But anyways, I agree. Just keeping the therapist as a live piece of co-creating art. And then the other thing that I just thought of when you were talking about that is, that analytic third, right? So there's the client, and then there's the therapist, and then there's the space in between them, and the new relationship and the new object that gets created by the dynamic. And for one, I love how alive and engaging that can be in the therapy room. And for two, I love to bring that into dance. I love to dance with the space between us and the analytic third and creating one body out of two bodies, and to see how we are with different bodies, and really, really taking that and bringing it to the next level so that we can understand ourselves better through mirror neurons and also the person that we are when we're with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's different philosophies. I, I've been reading this book, I think it's called Integrated Gestalt, but um, I also used to kind of reference back to like attachment or um, like if something happened between me and a client, and then I might say, "Oh, I'm wondering if that shows up in your life or something like that." But what's interesting, I mean, I'm just experimenting and learning, but like what these people are saying in this Gestalt book is um, that actually the experience itself is enough. That there isn't even now you could, of course, create threads of the subconscious past or somehow that is a reflection of some attachment dynamics. And they don't discourage it, but they also encourage that even just this moment, the immediacy of this experience is enough, and that not to diminish that, like me and you talking right now, or having this like whatever discussion, or maybe it's a rupture, or maybe it's like a some kind of I don't know, uh, uncomfortable moment or something like that, and that somehow that is therapeutic within itself. That somehow that and I think that's what makes it experiential, is that sometimes we try to stamp it with some kind of like meaning, or some kind of stereotypical thing that they should supposed to get out of it. But maybe there's something even more mysterious that is beyond like attachment, like what do you think?
Well, what I love that about that, this is like what's so exciting for me about what you're talking about, is that we're talking about working in the here and now and keeping, that's actually one of Yalom's concepts. I love Irv Yalom. He's like one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's cool. I like it.
It's and we're also talking about keeping things current. So sometimes again in therapy, we're like, oh, it's all about the past. These are all my mommy issues or whatever, which might be
Right,
true.
right,
But also, you know what? I'm dealing with you right now in this moment. And how can we, instead of bringing all of our baggage, just be present for the current moment and be alive with only what's happening right now? That alone is a huge gift
right,
and so
right,
exciting.
right,
Yeah,
right.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe there's room for both, like I think maybe the dynamic of, oh, I'm reminding you of your father is it is still happening right now, and then maybe I'm showing you, or you're showing me what it's like to be scared of your father right now by you being scared of me. So maybe there's something like, maybe it's both, right? But like but I think that's a really cool way to also not to I think as therapists we want to we have the need to know, where does this all fit in? How is this working on the treatment plan? What does this mean for them? Is this healing them? Or like and I think that need to know can also kind of be kind of a little bit an agenda, maybe. Yeah.
I Gosh, I might be misquoting, so I want to be sure that I think it's Brene Brown, but somebody was talking about how our brains are these little detectives, and we just want to understand what's going on. And so we will go ahead and look for an answer, and we will get a dopamine hit every time we try and make sense of something, whether the way we've made sense of it is correct or not. So we are human sense making machines. And that's also why if someone's going to go through trauma or something, that they'll go over and over and over again something that doesn't make sense to try to make sense of it. And they'll come up with all of these different theories. Because every time we come up with a theory, we're like, aha, I feel better right now. And, there's nothing wrong with that, but also sometimes it gets in the way. Sometimes we start living in our story rather than in our body or in our feelings or in the current moment. And so I completely agree with you. It's a both and I'm sure there's a zillion more factors too, ancestral healing and how someone's physically feeling that day and their gut health and their neurochemistry and, a million factors. But also that's part of what I love so much about therapy is that we can certainly make it a science and we certainly have a lot of research to demonstrate that it works, but also there's just some art and magic to it.
Totally.
And I personally believe that art and magic, and it exists in dance too, is it's about when someone gets it, and whatever's happening in that moment, you feel got and understood, and you're able to change something. Or if there's a moment where you get yourself, or you find yourself in a state of flow, whether there's flow between two people or flow in yourself alone or flow in community, it's from that state that, we kind of break out of whatever pattern of pain or challenge we're in and just can soar into freedom.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's true. And I think that's what well, I think with dance and somatic and, experiential forms of therapy is like um that people, like you said, they get it directly.
Yeah.
Not because I think I think the problem with like anecdotal things, like things that not that I don't like books and I love, knowledge and all that, but like I think one of the problems with I mean, that's what dance is unique because right, it's like you're not consuming, like you're not like watching or reading, you're like it's experience, right? So, but like I think one of the problems with like consuming or um this sort of anecdotal nature of like, oh, I read in a book or somebody told me this or somebody gave me advice or whatever. Um, there is a certain sense that like it's stereotypical, meaning like, oh, I should stand up for myself or I should set limits, or I should do this. And I think a lot of people are living their life through stereotypical behavior or stereotypical advice. And that's not to say that it's bad advice. I mean, I think that it's all things considered, but when it's directly experienced and it makes sense for a person, it becomes their own. And then so like if it is about it is about, oh, I need to say no more, so I need to say no to people more or whatever. It's not anecdotal. It's like I am feeling it. It makes sense to me that I want to do that for me. And I think that's only through experience can you come to that place of it making sense, not from like advice or something.
I love what you're talking about too. It's having internal agency and your internal locus of control too, to recognize that we and we alone are the only people that can change things or that can feel a certain way or that can make a choice about a certain thing. And um, this is actually one of the powerful things that sometimes I get in dance. It's a little bit hard to say in therapy, so I hope it doesn't get mistaken. But when we're dealing, especially with complex trauma or anything really painful, there's a desire to get outside help, right? And outside help is very helpful, of course, to be seen, to be held, to know, to be reminded that you're okay. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're the only one that can save you. You're the only one that can make your heart feel better or recognize that you are safe now or get yourself out of, little micro news situations that you might feel a red flag. And movement helps you learn to trust yourself, to learn to recognize the signals in your body and to find ways to feel safe. Uh, Therapy helps with the reflection around it and helps remind people, therapy helps you do that too, but it helps you more by having like another person reflect to you or remind you. And then that gives you the experience. Whereas in movement, sometimes it's like a direct personal experience that happens. Although sometimes it's guided too. Sometimes someone creates an activity and sets it up in a way where then you feel it in your body and you
Yeah.
get it.
I know I think Rachel, that's a really I know that's an edgy topic, but I really like it too. This idea of this sort of ownership of your own salvation or whatever you want to call it. I think that's one of those things that's been disputed, and it's certainly not for the general public because I think people have a tendency to feel like blaming the victim. There's typically a reaction like, oh, well, I got abused, and oh, well, you didn't listen to your body enough, and you got yourself into that situation, and but
Uh,
that's a reaction that I've encountered when talking about it with maybe people who are not that don't understand fully the idea, but fundamentally, I do agree that people that in a way only you can the only person that can hurt you is yourself because things do happen. There's like circumstances around that are harmful, and life is traumatic. Gravity is traumatic just by virtue of if you can fall any moment you can fall. So like it's as an oppressed existence is oppressive on the planet just by gravity itself. Like it's like there's harm everywhere. So it's undoubtedly trauma that you can accrue, but nothing is as harmful as your own self-defeat and wrong perception and harm you inflict as a result of those things. And it's the way that you blame yourself, the way you talk to yourself, the way that you put yourself as less than in relation to those situations. And so you are kind of, yeah, nobody can hurt you as harshly as you can.
well, there's the with regards to the victim blaming, it's never the victim's fault what happened to them ever. But it is our responsibility or their responsibility later in life to find ways to heal. And that's the piece, what happened in the moment was not their fault or not my fault or not your fault. But what happens later is the only thing that we have agency over. And so that's kind of the piece that I'm talking about a little bit more is not, did someone get themselves into a situation, but more after the situation has incurred. And I think this is what you were saying too, is how are we continuing to perpetuate the pain in our own minds? Uh, and how can we help ourselves to heal?
Right. Or even how do I prevent that from happening again?
Yeah,
Um,
yes. How do I
because
listen to myself to walk away from a relationship before it's abusive? Or do I realize, whatever, can be anything.
right, because people have also patterns where they have like serial abusive relationships, right? So then it becomes like, okay, like is it a predisposition or something, right? Or like are you do you let yourself be mistreated or something? Like is it your relationship to yourself or something that has to be changed? Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely true. And I think to not talk about it is kind of like looking the other way because like I think there's certainly a good share amount of sympathy that people who are victims require. But I do think that if we shoot for the Northern Star, I do think that it's possible to become so alive and so turned on that there's nothing in you to be abused anymore. That you're just not available for it, or that there isn't there's not nothing in you that is of that vibration or of that sentiment, perhaps. I mean, I know that's idealistic, but I certainly think that it's okay to move in that direction.
Well, the notion is that if you have a lot of holes and then, things out here in the world come and hook into the holes and continue to create new pain, that we eventually want to get ourselves to a place where we have less holes, where we can, so there will be less hooks that enter, or maybe to the point where there's no holes. So
There's no room, right?
there's no room.
Right.
So, that
Yeah.
might have happened a long time ago. You might have some big holes that happened when you were a kid, and then it's going to take a long time to heal them up. But then to prevent, yeah, future pain and to have agency. Yeah, it's a tricky dance, because we are impacted by our environment. We do feel, we have neural networks that are created from complex experiences that are not our fault, and we have so much power to shift things and so much ability to choose who we interact with and how we are. And sometimes it's hard to see that, it's sometimes there are just mind states where it's hard to remember that and hard to see it. And um again, like what we were saying before, it's all of both and, both things are true simultaneously.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and I also appreciate, I don't know if you're familiar with this modality called somatic relational healing. Um, and then there's also another one, sensory motor, which I think they both have like similar components, but they talk a lot about the power of like healing touch and just like the relationship, the healing relationship, which it doesn't necessarily take away from that agency that you're talking about, or that internal locus of control, but I think it provides so it's just another level of safety and resourcing for, or an environment for the person to maybe develop that ability to be their own salvation. So I'd certainly think it is as a combination. Um,
It's like that combo of self-regulation and co-regulation, both are true. In partnership, you don't just become an island and become sovereign because somebody is
right.
I don't know. I just need to go be by myself right now. And this relationship no longer exists because I'm in too much pain, but there are moments where that is necessary. And then also moments where, I'll hug my partner, or that kiss or hug is reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's probably why we feel so good when we dance in groups, because you're kind of co-regulating, right? You're like moving together.
Yeah, there was a dance I was just at, and the teacher Bella I don't remember who she referenced, but she was saying that she was reading a book, I can find out what it is, that on pleasure and joy. And she said that the difference is that I think it was pleasure is something you experience privately, and joy is something that you experience with everyone else. And so when you're out in a group, it is, or maybe, oh, I'm butchering the teaching because I hadn't planned it, but it was something about how it's all enhanced when you are in a group. And that when you're experiencing something that feels nice privately, it doesn't encode and create lasting change the same way it does when you're with a group. That all of the reflection and all of the mirror neurons and the shared experience actually creates a bigger um, impact for your future self than like one joyful moment that happens at home in private.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that togetherness, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Hmm. Nice. Not sure what else to say. That's cool. Um, hmm. Yeah, I mean, the other thing that I get, I don't know, we haven't really talked much, but my big huge kind of slogan or thing that I'm always preaching about is I don't know what your thoughts on this, but so there's this whole like what we call paradoxical allowance. And it's this idea that somehow, well, we've kind of been misled by the medical model because we're kind of taught that symptoms are that the body's symptoms are kind of misguiding, or like you have to sort of get rid of them, or that you have to fight disease, or get rid of your cold, or fight this, fight that. And there's a kind of maybe a mistrust in the body's natural ability to um like, for instance, like when somebody has a fever, they'll take Tylenol. Like there's a kind of, even though like now we're obviously more and more people are coming to terms with the fact that okay, fever is created to kill the virus. That's what happens. The temperature goes up so that it can kill the virus. And so there's a lot of these kind of mechanisms within the body that are for the benefit of the organism. Um, So, but nonetheless, like mental health, that doesn't really extend to like, symptoms of like mental health, depression, anxiety. So it creates like an adversarial relationship. So you're thinking like, I hate my depression. I'm sick of it. Um, and so this is sort of more Eastern kind of Taoist approach of like, you know, not fighting it, going into it, and kind of like the story of like the boy who there was like a whirlpool in the lake, and that's he was able to like go into it, and somebody asked him, "Oh, how do you survive those whirlpools?" And he's like, "Oh, I just like when I go into it, I just like relax and I just like go into it and it spits me back, it spits me out somewhere else or something." And so that's what I'm really like super like that's something that I truly believe in is like that if a client, that if a person, not a client, any of us, like that if you allow the experience fully, and you don't have a sort of aversion to like whatever is that's unwell within you, that there can be some kind of completion or fulfillment that is unbeknownst or something that there's maybe some hidden positive intent in going to that experience that which you typically try to get rid of or something like that.
I love that. I mean, it's just making peace with everything that is and that's happening and seeing what the inherent wisdom might be in depression or illness. And yeah, it makes me think this is a little bit of a ramble, but it's also on topic. It makes me think of that concept of secondary gain also, how sometimes we like to be depressed in some ways. There's something we get out of it, or probably not the case with like terminal illness or anything like that. But um, there are ways where our mental states that are negative, uh, that sometimes if we're not getting better, that there's actually a secondary gain in there, and there's a reason that we're choosing not to get better. Some people call it an existential kink also. Um, have you heard
Yeah,
about there's like ways we kind of unconsciously choose something that hurts us over and over and over again because there's also something we keep getting out of it.
absolutely. No, that's exactly at least one aspect of it. Because like, and I think that that's the problem with, I think again, this sort of self-report. Because like if a person comes in and says, "Oh, well, um, I'm sick of my procrastination," or like I have this problem with like drugs or something, and then like it's a lopsided kind of self-report because they're like pitting themselves and saying, okay, like there's this, I like myself and I like to do all these great things, and then there's this other thing, this procrastination that I hate and it's getting in the way. But like what they don't say or speak on or experience is when they're indulging in the procrastination and being like, oh, this is so nice not to do anything or watch TV all day. And that's when you, like you said, they're probably relishing in that other thing or they like it to some degree.
There's
Uh,
things like that. I can speak that. So lately I'm like really living on my purpose, right? I'm really out there in the world doing the things that I really want to. And it's hard. There are so many days that I actually feel like, wow, it would be way easier to just crawl under a cave and not do anything and not be a productive member of society and not be living in my purpose because that would be so much less pressure, so much more relaxing. I wouldn't have to think about all of these things. And so I can see how everything is a double-edged sword. Like sometimes actually playing it small and laying low is a protective mechanism because actually choosing to live your life fully is actually not easy. It's a lot harder to be happy and to have a whole lot of things to lose than it is to actually kind of stay at the bare minimum. So there are ways where we straight up just sabotage ourselves and don't get better or don't live our fullest life because there's some kind of fear or some kind of reason that we're choosing not to do it. So it's not just like we're definitely there's moments where we're relishing, like relishing in the cave or whatever, but there's also times where, we have a story, we're only allowed to have this much happiness and we can't actually go above it. There's a glass ceiling. We can't go beyond our upper limit or um
yeah. Well, and I
and
guess I'll just add that not to demean the person who's relishing, and I'm sure I do that sometimes too, but it is what I'm saying is sort of get to know the lopsidedness of our to become more dynamic so that you can reclaim this part that you put off as not you, or like an involuntary aspect that says, oh, you know what I mean? So it's maybe getting to know it, it will help transform it anyways. Not to say that, oh, I'm gonna give into it forever by liking it.
Totally. No, I love it. I always think of that song, Sound of Silence, the Hello Darkness, My Old Friend.
Oh
Anytime
yeah,
I
yeah,
feel
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sadness, I'm like, I just want to curl up with my sadness in a ball. And hello, darkness, my old friends. Like, let's just come in for tea. That they're actually, even though it's painful, sometimes I can find a comfort in it or melancholy or something like that. And I think that that's possible for a lot of people I think it's possible for us to embrace our emotions even if they don't feel good.
Right, right, right. I mean, and the only alternative is to try harder, which
Override,
usually
override.
doesn't.
Just keep doing things and you'll be fine. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what a wild ride. So this podcast, tell me more about this podcast.
Traditionally, when I used to be clinical director at the Process Therapy Institute, we used to have these podcasts, and we interviewed a whole bunch of people, ranging from all sorts of different providers, ketamine, anesthesiologists, like different people in the field, and it was a lot of fun. It was a way to stay excited about what I'm doing and stay in touch with people, being connected, and also allow my community to get to know people that I know and kind of spread the word about people's work. Um, and then since I've left them and I have my own kind of thing going on with Spiral Process, I decided I'm just gonna keep basic continue doing it, rebranded.
I love it. It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Cool. I love it. I love this meandering therapy dance conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for chatting it up with me, and it's nice I've gotten to know you a little bit better. I don't think we've made time to talk otherwise in any case, so that's nice to kind of share a little bit about how we work, and so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that I could dance right next to you for so many years and feel the sense of knowing you so much, but never have a 50-minute conversation, let alone a collegial professional conversation that's being recorded. It's beautiful. It's amazing this dance therapy world we live in.
Uh, all right, Rachel, I will see you around. I'll probably see you in San Jose sometime at the dance.
Yes, I will be there on March 9th.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.